Okay, this is BUAD 101, Business of Life. And the first section of this class is personal branding, as you know from the syllabus and from our learning system, Canvas at the moment. And so, just want to be able to go through and show this to you. This will be a little bit longer. You can listen to part of it at a time, move to different sections, go back and forth, whatever you need to do. So, this is how this is going to work. So we're going to do a little bit of a high level marketing overview. We'll talk about customer experience, personal brand, and then generation gaps, and how that affects communication really is what this is around. So, all right, so this high level marketing overview, and I do apologize for the state being up there. I did not have time to readjust the uh, background of these slides to reflect no state in Western Colorado University. So, but I'll move on from that. So, as we talk about a definition for marketing, right, we look at kind of the old view is really about telling and selling things. Our new view has moved more into how do we help satisfy the needs of our customers or other businesses, whoever it is that we're selling to or whatever it is that we're trying to do. Right, as we go into this red box in the middle, right? So this is a process, social and managerial, where individuals and groups obtain what they need through creating and exchanging products and value with others, right? Needs and wants, right? So the question becomes is then how do we do that, right? How do we convince people that what we've got, what we're trying to sell, is what they want, is what they need? How do we do that, right? And especially in some things that really aren't, we don't really need it, and we're learning more about what we need and want through the COVID crisis. Um, so it's interesting for us to think about how we do this. And please remember that through all of this, what we're talking about is our own personal brand. While we're talking about this from a larger business corporate perspective, I want to try to bring everything back to how we do this as individuals, how we market ourselves, how we brand ourselves, right? In how we communicate with others and how we show others that we can provide something that they might need or want, right? Especially as we're out in the job market, as we're volunteering, doing different things. Frankly, some of this is even in relationships, right? Um, many times we don't like to think about these things that way, but that's, there is one degree of truth to some of that. Okay, so as we look at this big picture, if you've had a marketing class before, you've seen what's in the outer red with all of this, right? Product, price, place, and promotion. I don't necessarily say them in the order that they are there. That's how I learned that. The four P's, the marketing mix. So how do we talk about, right? Because it's all of this together. All of this communicates something to those who we're trying to provide value to, right? How we're going to try to create relationships, how we're going to create an exchange, right? Money for services, money for a product, whatever it might be, right? Sometimes it's even trade or barter, if you will, right? But how do we create, communicate, and deliver value in all of this while being truthful, right? So I can certainly go out there and promise the moon, right? But if in the end I can't deliver that, then there's disappointment, dissatisfaction. They probably, fire me, kick me out, whatever. Um, right? We become that exchange just doesn't happen again, right? It might have happened the first time, but it's not going to happen again, right? So that product, as we think about this as a marketing overview, right? That product can be a good or a service, right? Or some combination thereof, like at a restaurant where you've got both food and service that's provided, right? Place is not necessarily just about location, right? Some of place is how we get products from point A to point B, or how we get people from Texas and Florida and wherever it is, right, to Gunnison to ski at Mount Crested Butte, right? So how do we do that, right? So it's kind of that supply chain, if you will, how we get people and products together, right? Promotion, right, is how we promote, if you will, a product, advertise, market, communicate that value. Price is a part of that, and how we, for whatever reason, some cars, just as an example, are a lot more expensive than others. Do they travel the road any differently? Are they different in how they get me from point A to point B? At the basic level, no. In another level, yes. And so, people are willing to pay more for that Lamborghini than they are for, that, I don't know, that little Toyota or whatever. We have a Toyota, right? Whatever. You know what I mean, right? Some of those things are priced vastly differently, and they really are just cars on one level. But they communicate something, right? The logo on the front, the name of the car, whatever it might be, right? That communicates something. So does how the product looks. Where is it located? Where is it sold? How do we talk about it? Right? So all of those things are a part of this. And the same thing is true with us, right? As we start looking around, maybe at the end of this semester or down the road a little bit, you're graduating from college, graduating from Western, and you're, getting ready to really make sure you've got your being able to communicate right? Your product, your brand, who you are. How do I do that? Right? Where do I go look? What's the product look like? Where do I go out and look for that job? How do I promote myself? What does my resume look like? How's my cover letter? Has it got spelling mistakes in it, or is it pretty clean and actually look pretty sharp and maybe a little different than everybody else's? Right? What am I looking at right out of the gate? What positions am I going for? Right? So the kind of the price that I'm trying to get out of a company for my services. Right? And as I'm walking out of college, I may not be going to get that, manager position somewhere because maybe I just don't really have all that much experience. And so going for something like that, we may not be able to deliver on that right away. Whereas as we gain experience and over time, we can actually, right, provide the level of service that would turn into more money, right? Just for example. So, all right. So I talked about this a little bit, right, down here in the circles down at the bottom, right? But as we think about, right, the product and the service, right, but some combinations of product and services or other information or experiences, right, all of this is what is offered to attempt to satisfy that need or that want, right? So part of those things are experiences that we've had with a brand, right? So, right, I know that if I were able to ask you Ford or Chevy, for example, right? Or maybe I'd have to go Ford or Chevy or Toyota or, right, whatever. So thinking about brands of vehicles, trucks especially. I could do the same thing with computers. I could say PC or Mac. I could do the same thing with phones and say iPhone or Samsung, right? Just, those kinds of things. We've had experiences with things, or our families or those we're around have had experiences with things, and they affect our choices. Right. So as we think about those market offerings, how do we do well at those kinds of things? And so as we think about that from our own personal brand, right, those things that we can provide and the experiences that people have with us, right, maybe that's just in an interview, right? It's with our resume and our cover letter, right? Whatever it might be. Maybe we get to the point where we get a phone interview or a Zoom interview, right? Some kind of interview like that. Do the people feel like what we can provide, the knowledge that we have, maybe our product or our service, the specific job, but then their experiences with us as we go through that interview process, they're like, will they, a little bit of that's a crapshoot, but will this potential employee meet the needs and wants that we have for our company? Right. And again, sometimes those are tough questions to answer until somebody's been there for a while, but at that point I've already hired them. If it doesn't work out, well, we try again. Right. And there's a lot of truth to that with the things that we purchase as well. Right. I don't know for sure how it's going to be. It looked really good in the grocery store. It looks like it would taste good. Take it home. And it's not what I was hoping for. Right. Well, lesson learned. I'll try something else. Right. With whatever that product might have been. Right, so now let's talk about brand for a minute. Right, this could be a name, a term, a symbol, a design, a combination of things. It can be even a little jingle, right, that goes along with things. You can look at most of these probably, of those symbols, those brand marks, right, in the middle of that, and you can tell me, what company they are. It's no fair when we're talking about Coca-Cola and Samsung and Google, right? All those things, they've got their name and the brand itself, right? But we all know about Apple, right? We know about some coffee in Seattle up there with Starbucks, right? We know McDonald's, right? We can see those things coming from a mile away. You can even see Pepsi on the side. You know what it is. You can see YouTube up there. You can see Canon, right? Amazon, even though we're only seeing a part of it, right? We know what it is. Sometimes we know jingles, right? Da 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 da, right? You can get that kind of stuff, and you already know that was McDonald's, okay, right? So, it's just interesting, and you'll look at some of those and you'll go, man, I'm not a Coke person. I'm a Pepsi person, right? Whatever, right? I'm not an Apple person. I'm a Samsung person, right? Right? We all have those kind of things that are us. And we also have those kind of things when we look at our friends, that where we would want to work, right? It's like, I just don't think I'd get along with them, or I don't think I'd enjoy working there, or, right? And so, and we're going to have individuals as us as individuals, when we go look for jobs, right? Change jobs, get a new one, right? Get your first ever job, whatever it might be, right? We're going to go interview, and we're going to send things out, and some people are just going to be like, they had the interview and they're just like, just that's just not going to work out, right? We've hired that type of employee before, and it just doesn't work out, right? And sometimes we're going to think, well, you know what, that's not fair. Maybe not. Sometimes, you hear people say, well, life's not fair, and we just kind of have to move on. And sometimes you're going to say, well, I don't go to McDonald's, I only go to Burger King or Wendy's. Like, well, McDonald's is going to say, well, that's not fair. It's like, well, you know what, I've had experiences and it is fair, right? So, or, members of our family, friends had a bad experience at one or the other, and, you just have chosen not to go there. So, all right. As we talk more about brand, right? We talk about, again, it's this name or this symbol, and when we see those symbols, the theory is that we see things that we have experience with, things where we know that we were satisfied with the experience or not, right? So, some people, really love one thing and really don't like the other, and they're very brand loyal. There are other times where you go in, it's like, I'm just looking for the best bang for the buck. I'm looking for the cheapest, or whatever it might be. And as you get older and maybe get a little more money, we don't worry about always buying, the 25-cent box of mac and cheese. I can move all the way up to the Kraft brand of macaroni and cheese, or the one that actually comes with a pouch of at least pseudo cheese, right, as opposed to a powder. Right, all those kind of things help us make decisions, right? And so around that brand perceptions are, the expectations. If I'm going to buy a $250,000 car, I have different expectations than, that $15,000 car I bought, right? So we create those expectations, and the brands, the price that's set there, how things are communicated through advertising, those kind of things all develop this perception we have of a brand, and how they made our needs and our wants and even our hopes to some degree. So, branding is really important, and it's really an interesting thing to study as we think about how that fits with our own personal brands, right? What expectations do we create? What experiences do people have with us? Do we meet the needs and wants of some company that we're trying to get a job with, right? We can even talk about, personal relationships with wants and needs and hopes and dreams and, all those kind of things. It really is pretty interesting as we think about what kind of a brand we want to have, right? So that it's a bit more intentional than maybe how we set ourselves up in high school. At least I know certainly how I set myself up in high school. I didn't think about this kind of stuff, even in college. It wasn't until later that I started thinking about those things. And that's why I wanted to make sure we talk about some of these kinds of things now for you to maybe jumpstart where you're at, as opposed to just figuring it out later in life on your own, right? To put these kind of things out there. Many of us just went to school, did our thing, did our homework, played sports, did drama, or did none of that, right? Anywhere in between. And we created a brand for ourselves. You all know different groups at your old high school or even in college where, that's the drinkers, that's the stoners, that's the jocks, that's the drama club, that's the artsy people, that, whatever we called them at the time. Some of it may not have been kind. Um, but, people had those same kind of perceptions of us as well, whether we thought about it or, whether it meant anything to us or whether we cared, right, or not. Um, but each of us has a brand. The question is it the brand we want, or is it just kind of the brand that we've just kind of gone with, and it's just kind of, become us by default, which isn't necessarily who we want to be. Might be, might not be, right? So it's interesting to think about those kind of things now, and that's what I want to be able to help you work on. This is an interesting video. You won't be able to watch this as part of this recording, but the PowerPoint slides are also in Canvas. You can go through and find this and just watch. This is a real brief video. I think it's just shy of 2 minutes, and it's just about the power of words. I think it's a setup a little bit, but the message is still pretty important, right? In the words that we choose to use. So I'll let you watch that on your own. So now, as we think a little bit about customer satisfaction, right? Meeting or exceeding customer expectations, right? I walk into a store, whatever kind of store that might be, and I have some expectations about how things are going to go a little bit. And, when my expectations aren't met, right, I'm disappointed, right? And so it has a tendency for me to look down a little bit on the situation, right, or the company, the brand that I was dealing with, right? So in this situation here, this is about Windows Vista, and Windows Vista, frankly, didn't go very well, right? So they had, I don't remember all the different versions of Windows they had back then, but I remember this one, and it wasn't a good thing, right? It was slow, slower than the previous version. They got away from Windows Vista pretty quickly, right? It came out, things just weren't going well, people weren't happy. And so they moved on to the next version of Windows. I think the next one was actually Windows 7, right? And it was much better. It was kind of back to being quick and easy to move around and those kind of things, as opposed to, oh man, this is slow, right? So, as we walk in and people have expectations of us, right? I have expectations of students in a class. You have expectations of a faculty member teaching, right? And if we don't meet the needs of each other, you just kind of you stop doing your homework, or show up to class half the time or whatever, and just kind of like, wow, that's not what I expected. I'm not really happy with this at all. Now, I recognize, and so should you, that sometimes there are extenuating circumstances and all these kind of things. We don't necessarily know everything that's going on in people's lives, and so some compassion is a good thing. But at some point, especially in a business, it's like an employee can either do the job or they can't, right? And it really doesn't matter anymore what life situations they have. We kind of have to be able to, either get it done or move on. So, and there are sometimes in relationships that those kind of things happen as well. Unfortunately, right? We've got about a 50% divorce rate in the country. And, anyway, that's not what this is about. But as we're thinking about, again, our personal brand and meeting or exceeding the expectations of those around us, it doesn't mean we have to be perfect. Right? Please don't set that expectation for yourself, because it just won't happen. And those who expect that, even at all, it's wrong from an internal perspective for us to expect that of ourselves, but it's also wrong of employers and others to expect us to be perfect, because nobody is. So, we have to find some compassion there as well. So in relationship marketing, right, part of our goal is to obtain and keep, right, and to keep and improve relationships with our customers, right? We've got to grab new ones, right? That acquisition or acquire up there at the top. We got to keep them and then extend that and grow, right? And it's not only increasing the numbers of people that are there, but also in making that relationship better, right? And that comes from touch points, if you will, experiences that we have with each other, right? All of that is necessary in all of this. I've talked a little bit about this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but You could pause this, right, and just take a look at um, the different categories, right? Product, price, place, and promotion, and then some of the pieces that fit into that, right, underneath each one of those. But what I do want to focus on this one is coming down to that center, right, and how we target our customers, right? Saying that I'm going to sell Lamborghinis and I'm going to sell them to everybody, right? That it just doesn't work, right? If I got a $250,000 car, for example, right, there's not many people in the world that are going to afford, and even if they could, let alone buy, right, that type of vehicle at that price. Um, and so we look for specific target customers, right? Those who have the money and would likely make a purchase of that sort. And then we set up a position, right? A message, right? Some way of setting this up in people's minds where this is a good idea. Not only is it a good idea, I actually have the ability to act on it, right? In other words, make the purchase, right? So it's interesting how we should focus this down. There's some things, it's in a grocery store, milk, right? Everybody's going to buy it. Okay, not quite everybody, right? Some people don't like it, they're allergic to it, right? Whatever. Um, but for the most part, there are many things in stores that pretty much anybody would buy, right? And so that you know targeting customers at that point really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, but in other situations, it makes all the difference in the world, right? I might sell the same product to 5 different groups of people, and my messaging to those 5 groups could be different, right? Because they buy it for a different reason, right? So, you might think about TVs or computers, right? Depending on why people use what they use, right? All those kind of things. It really becomes pretty interesting to think about those. Another part of this is in our marketing analysis around the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal, right? What strengths or weaknesses do I have? And then what opportunities and threats, those external things that are out there, right? That, may be great opportunities. It might be a threat to whatever it is that I'm doing. Um, I will ask you as part of this first section of this class is to write down and turn into me your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, I'm not asking for any, grandly personal information. If you're a drug addict and you don't want to put that as your weaknesses, that's cool, right? I'm not asking for that, level of detail at that point. But also, be honest with yourself. Write some things down. Don't just write 1 or 2 down in each category. Think about this. Think about, almost pretty much everybody here, right, has a threat that is potentially COVID-19 and the economy of the U.S., right? If you don't write that one down, then I know you probably didn't listen to the video, right, or watch the video and listen to me, yak about it. But to think about those kind of things, what are the opportunities that are out there? What are the threats that are in the world? Outside of myself that I really don't have a whole lot of control over, but that I can adjust myself to if I need to, right? What am I good at? What do I struggle with, right? All of those kind of things are important for us to think about. Okay, so I look forward to seeing what you've got that way, because it is interesting, right, to really sit down and do a little bit of a self-analysis for yourself. So if you need a break, right, this is the time to pause the video. And come back to it later, or just keep pushing through. But talk a little bit more about customer service and understanding what that means, right? So you can go over there on the right-hand side, waited 30 minutes, no service, right? Thanks for the ketchup and mustard on the counter, even though there appears to be some food that's being pointed at by that yellow finger, right up there. Who knows? That could have been somebody else's, right? Hard to say. But how do we provide excellent customer service? And certainly what the Ritz-Carlton might provide, right, this upscale hotel chain versus the Southwest Airlines, which is a more, economy airline, they're very different in what they provide. But if it's what's expected, right, then we're okay, right? And customers can be satisfied with Southwest Airlines just as much as they can with the Ritz-Carlton, right? It can be very different, right? And certainly the people in the picture over there on the right clearly expected to not sit there for 30 minutes with nobody showing up to help them out, right? Again, you can have some compassion for people, and maybe they were slammed and all that, but at some point, either people came over to help you get some food or they didn't, right? And we have to move on. I don't know that we need to do ketchup and mustard on the counter to make our point. That may be a little extreme, even in displaying and showing some dissatisfaction, but right, we need to be able to provide some excellent level of customer service to at least meet the expectations of our customers, and hopefully to be able to go beyond that. So I mentioned touch points a moment ago on the a couple of slides back. Here's another point for that. But being able to think about our journey, and what we've gone through, the sum of our experiences, what kind of things motivated us, what activities were there, what questions did we have, what obstacles did we have that needed to be overcome, what were we feeling about these kind of things, and what are those touch points with a company, a business, a school, right? And that comes up to another assignment that's a part of this, right? So as you think about this, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one either, but you can pause it if you'd like. But you think about considering becoming a customer of a credit card company, and how did you figure out that you wanted to be a part of that? Maybe it's easier to see on the other one with Avis. You think about what rental company am I going to go through? How did I find that out? That I made a reservation, I got the car, I actually had the rental, I'm out driving it around, I return it, right? And then stuff after the fact that may or may not happen, especially if I had an accident or something like that. There's lots of touch points there where you're interacting with people, with the car. Did it break down? All of those kind of things, and then you start thinking about challenges that were there. What were great things that happened? And you just kind of end up with this journey that then after the fact, all of this comes down and boils down into the brand that we associate with Avis. And then we determine, would I do that again, or would I go look at Budget or Hertz or whoever else might be out there. So what I'd like you to do, and right, this picture's old as well because we still got state in there, but think about the time when you were applying to colleges, right? And I'd like you to map your journey a little bit and map your touch points, right, with this. So this is what the form or the paper will look like in Canvas, right? And so I'm asking you to look at your journey, right? And so you've got those green boxes up there at the top, right? Talk about what your journey was, right? So as we go back here, right, what were your journey? What was your journey? What motivated you? What did you do, right? So did you come to campus? Did you talk to a coach? Did you talk to a faculty member? Right? Did you talk to a recruiter? Right? Who did you talk to? Did you look at the website? Right? So walk me through those types of things in chronological order, and then down below, talk a little bit about some of the other things. Right down here, where did you see it in these touch points down at the bottom in the orange? Was it a website? Did you talk to people? How were you feeling? Right? What obstacles did you come up against? Right? So all those kind of things. Just fill this into the best of your ability. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just walk me through your touch points, and then up at the top, and then just kind of how things went, what you were feeling. You don't have to fill in the whole thing, but if you've got 4, 5, 6 different touch points up there at the top, and then how the rest of it went, that would be great. So now as we talk about personal brand, right? Oh, by the way, that was another option for a pause. We look at the 4 C's, right? And you think about your brand, right? Clarity, right? How clear is it? Do you act differently around different people? Or are you more or less the same person no matter where you're at? I know lots of people who were, one way with their parents and very different around their friends. I understand being a little different around friends and maybe being a little more relaxed and things like that. But, anyway, it's just interesting how it seems like some people are very different in different circumstances. And I understand why there's some difference. But being very different in those situations seems to me that people don't understand or haven't clearly thought out what their personal brand is, right? And so they're, just kind of being whoever they're around, kind of thinks they want them to be, right? And that's not what brand is about, to me, right? So if we've got that clarity, we provide some communication and some consistency, right? Clarity and consistency are certainly intertwined. Um, and there's nothing wrong with having some color around this, right? Meaning some, just being different, being you, right? Doesn't mean we all have to be robots and exactly the same person. That's, we can still be us and have some fun and provide some color and, all those kind of things with, it doesn't mean we just have to be, off to the wind and, I'm just kind of whatever I want to be in every different situation and nobody can get a grasp for who I am. We don't necessarily want that, but, again, though, right, to each their own, right? It's not for me to dictate how somebody else is. Um, this is just advice on future careers as you think about what you want to do. I recognize that not everybody in this class is a business major, right? We've got a cross section of the class, and so being able to think about who we want to be based on a little bit at least to what we want to be from a job perspective or whatever else it might be down the road. We need to be able to think about those kind of things, and it's kind of fun, honestly. So as we think about these things, I've got another assignment for you. This is kind of the culminating experience or project within this section of the class. I'll ask you to identify your virtues and values based on a pretty big list of possible virtues and values, those things that speak to you the most or mean the most to you. You'll determine a little bit of your emotional appeal, and this is all spelled out in a document that's, I think, about 6 pages long that you'll work through. You'll seek some feedback, right, from others, family, friends, maybe an employer if you're employed right now, and just, you'll ask people a couple of questions, right, and kind of get their view on how they see you. So you'll put all that together, and then at the end, and I want to stress this, is you're going to create your own brand, right? Your self-portrait, your brand statement, not just a summary of what people told you or what you circled on your paper, but also what you want your brand to be, right? Again, so not just a summary, but going forward, this is who I want to be, and how I want people to view me, right? So I think this is interesting. I've had great feedback from other students in the past on this, and I think it's a good thing, right? So here's a look. Good old famous Tony Hawk, good old skateboarder, and you can view this video. You should be able to, down in the bottom left-hand corner, be able to click on that and view this and to view that video. If you can't, let me know. As I'm moving from Blackboard to Canvas, we'll see how these kind of things work. If that doesn't work, let me know and I'll provide the link more easily for this right within Canvas for you. We talk about a little bit what employers want, right? And certainly we can talk about technical skills, right? The ability to do the job. And with this, we need what they call soft skills, right? So the ability to be flexible, to communicate, to be honest, to have integrity, to be able to work with others, to be self-motivated, right? Not having to have somebody come into the office, all the time and say, hey, let's go, let's get this done, right? But to be self-motivated, to see something that needs to be done and just do it, right? Anything from taking out the trash to, things that are, maybe more important than that. Just depends on what it is, right? To be a team player. It's important to try to help develop these too as you learn the other skills through your education that are important to getting jobs in a certain field, right? It's certainly important for a chemist, right, to know all the things that go along with inorganic and organic chemistry, just all of that. But if you can't get along with others in the workplace, or if you don't get anything done, you can't be flexible with a schedule even a little bit, or if you're just not honest in what you're doing, right? Those things are problems, right? No matter how good you are at what you do, right? So those are important things to consider as well. Here's a video on personal brand. It's kind of a TEDx kind of a thing that I'll let you take a look at on your own. It's about 15, 16 minutes. Um, Pretty interesting. The guy does a good job of talking about it. And then finally, the last section of this, again, one more opportunity for a break if you'd like. Obviously, you can click pause or get out of it whenever you want to. But so let's just talk about this for just a moment. This is interesting. Right? Children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for adults, love to talk rather than work or exercise, no longer rise when adults enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter in front of company, gobble down their food at the table, and intimidate their teachers. The question is when was this written, right, or said, right? A long time ago, right? Seems like one generation thinks the next generation, right, the newer generation is, disrespectful and things like that. It's interesting how this has been around for a long time, forever. I don't know, right? Pretty interesting. Think about different generations. These are not all of them, right? But it's interesting how they're viewed differently. You can see some of the years down there. And then here's a couple of funny videos you can watch. Yeah, but they illustrate the differences in generations and how communication and perspective can sometimes be a challenge. Okay, not going to read all of this to you either, but as we look at these four generations, and you think about kind of the stereotypical person within that time frame when they were born, and I use stereotypical on purpose, right? These are stereotypes. Not everybody within the boomers or Gen X or Gen Y and forward or backwards are all the same, right? There are people that are different, but this is how in general things are seen, and it's interesting to look at some of this. So perceptions and values, interesting to look at a little bit here too. I'll let you take a look at that. Pause it if you want to read through that. But the point is, at times there's conflict between groups, right, and figuring out how to work together when people, and this is true, it doesn't matter what generation they're in, right? People are just going to be different. How do we communicate? Some people like texting, some people like a phone call, sometimes people like a personal visit, all those kind of things, and sometimes that's a function of the situation. Sometimes it's people are just different, and you've got to understand that. And sometimes, if we're going to say I'm going to quit, you don't do that via text message, right? You go in and you talk to somebody, right? For example, right? So being able to know and understand those things is important as well. Again, it might depend more on the situation than whether or not we're talking to somebody from a different generation than we're from, right? This is more or less what I was talking about. And I'm not a baby boomer, but I'm pretty close. Technically a Gen Xer, but I text and use Facebook and use different types of electronic communication more so than some other people in my age group, right? And again, it's just different. And you just have to learn what people want, what they hope for, what they expect, and again, recognizing the situation and what's going to be more appropriate in that situation than maybe what makes us feel comfortable. It's like, I'd rather quit. Yeah, I'd rather quit via text message, right? No personal interaction, don't have to feel uncomfortable. But it's, you just got to figure out, in my opinion at least, and maybe this is a generation thing too, it's, what's the right thing to do. So anyway, thinking about how we kind of try to align people, and this is what I'm talking about, right? Knowing ourselves, understanding that there might be a different ethic, different ways to communicate. It can be helpful to get a mentor, right, to help us work on things and understand how things work within a business, for example, and to manage our distractions. Our phones, other things are so distracting today. We think we can multitask, and we probably can't, not as well as we think we can at least. And so how do we manage distractions? How do we make those things work? Right. So wrapping this up, I've seen some things over time. It's really interesting. A couple of sample emails that I've received over time. Right. The subject is, hey, right? Hey Nelson, right? Interesting to use a last name only. Usually what I tell people, even students on campus, you can call me Kevin, you can call me Dr. Nelson. Didn't like being called just Nelson in high school. Don't appreciate it now. But again, that might just be something that's me. Um, and then of course, the next part. Did I miss anything important in class today? No, we don't do anything important. Don't worry about it. Right. So just thinking about how we communicate, and then the next one, right, is all um, lowercase. Right. You're not if you're emailing me or somebody else on campus trying to be professional. Um, that's not it. Right. So being able to understand that as well is pretty important, and consider using your resources before you know send one of those two emails anyway. So anyway, hope that was helpful, and that's the first section of the class.